There was smoke rising from Karen Mitchell's backyard. Not the gentle, ribbon-thin kind that came from summer barbecues or autumn leaf piles. This smoke was darker, thicker, a greasy gray smear on the sky that made people stop mid-conversation and look up like they'd just heard glass shatter. 3 sheriff cruisers idled in front of her hydrangeas, lights pulsing lazily, as if the neighborhood was too calm to deserve sirens. A deputy in mirrored sunglasses ducked under the sagging strand of yellow caution tape and barked something about digital fraud into his shoulder mic moments later. A man in a wrinkled polo shirt wheeled a dusty tower PC down the driveway, the whole thing wrapped tight in plastic like a crime scene body. And there she was, Karen, standing in the middle of it all like some dethroned queen. Face as red as her overpriced roses, arms flailing, voice hoarse from yelling, barefoot, unbrushed, and unraveling on her lawn like a Greek tragedy with a clipboard. And me? I was across the street, sipping hot coffee with perfect Wi-Fi, watching it all unfold like a Sunday morning soap opera. You're probably wondering what happened. What she did. What I did. Why there's crime scene tape hanging over rose bushes in a neighborhood where people mow diagonally for curb appeal. But the better question is, where would you start this story if it happened to you? The sirens? The coffee? The screaming? Or the quiet morning weeks earlier, when I moved into Cedar Pines with the naive belief that this neighborhood was what the realtors promised? Peaceful, picturesque, predictable. The kind of place where nobody locks their bikes, where porch lights twinkle instead of glare, and where the loudest thing after dark is a wind chime. That illusion didn't last long. The houses in Cedar Pines are close enough for awkward waves and far enough for plausible deniability. It's suburban purgatory. You're not alone, but you're never really known either. And I was okay with that, at least until she appeared. Karen Mitchell, HOA president, power walker-in-chief. She approached the same afternoon the moving truck left, materializing like a judgmental specter just as I cracked open my last box. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, stretching her lips into something that resembled a smile but felt like a trap. She held out a laminated packet. I reached for it. "We really value uniformity here," she added, eyes lingering a second too long on my slate blue shutters, like their very color had insulted her ancestors. The packet was thick. Rules, regulations, bylaws so specific you'd think they were written by an obsessive-compulsive architect with a god complex. No lawn ornaments over 14 inches. No external lights over 800 lumens. No trash bins visible for more than 22 minutes post-collection. I gave a polite laugh, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. The packet was real. The enforcement was realer. But I'd lived in HOA-controlled neighborhoods before. I knew how to play the game. Keep your lawn cut, your music low, and your personality muted. Blend in. Don't stand out. It was survival by suburbia. But Karen wasn't playing a game. Karen was building an empire. And every empire needs a villain. Apparently, I had the perfect face for the part. The infractions started small. Minor. Petty. The porch light I'd had for years? Too bright. My recycling bin? Excessively visible after collection hours. My mailbox? Structurally uneven. At first, I brushed them off. Bureaucratic power flexes. Karen's way of reminding everyone who ruled the cul-de-sac. But then, something changed. My internet, usually stable, occasionally sluggish, began acting strangely. Not random outages, but precise drop-offs. From 6 to 10 p.m., like clockwork. Again in the early morning. Smart devices disconnected. Video calls froze. The thermostat glitched. It felt like my house had developed its own sleep schedule, one that coincided suspiciously with primetime television and workout hours. I checked everything. Rebooted. Replaced cables. Called the ISP. No outages in the area. No explanation. Except the router logs. Unfamiliar devices were popping up. Not hacking attempts, not malware, just regular devices. Household ones. And that's when I saw it. iPad_cam_child profile. The initials weren't a coincidence. And the memory rushed back, hot and sticky like old guilt. 2 months earlier. The block party. A forced fun event organized by Karen herself. She'd guilt-tripped me into hosting it. "Best way to integrate," she said. "New faces bring fresh energy." She showed up early. With gluten-free brownies, a stack of HOA brochures, and a small army of gossip-thirsty lawn chair generals. Somewhere between the awkward introductions and lukewarm sangria, she'd asked, sweet as syrup, if her son could connect to my Wi-Fi, just for a few minutes to stream cartoons. I'd said yes. Of course. I gave her the guest network. Thought nothing of it. Until now. Until I realized that since that day, the guest network hadn't just stayed open. It had become the digital bloodstream of Karen's smart home addiction. Curious, I checked deeper. DHCP logs. Device names. MAC addresses. Over a dozen unique connections. Ringcam_Mitchell. Peloton_cam. Alexa_kitchen. Smart TV_living room. She hadn't piggybacked. She'd moved in. Her home wasn't just connected. It was dependent. I was her internet provider. For free. The next morning, I asked her casually, "Hey Karen, your son's iPad wouldn't still be connected to my network, would it?" She blinked, once then again faster. "Oh heavens no. We have our own service. Gigabit fiber. Very fast." She waved it off like I'd asked her if she used dial-up. But her performance had holes. Because that same night, her Peloton streamed for 45 minutes, and I logged every packet. Her Ring camera uploaded motion alerts every time a squirrel sneezed. I wasn't just annoyed. I was watching my bandwidth being eaten alive by HOA vampires. So I cut the cord. Changed the password. Monday morning. 6:01 a.m. A symbolic fresh start. At 6:08 a.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Karen standing there like a rejected sitcom character. Leopard print robe. Bulldog slippers. Wet hair. Mascara halfway down one cheek like war paint. "Did you change your Wi-Fi password?" Her voice trembled. Not with fear, with rage. I sipped my coffee. "Sure did." Her eyes narrowed. "Without telling me?" I blinked. "Karen, you're not on my plan." "Well, I was," she snapped. "And everything was working fine until now. My house system is down. I can't even turn on my kitchen lights." "Sounds like a personal problem," I said and gently closed the door. I thought that would be the end. But Karen doesn't lose. She retaliates. That afternoon, a new violation appeared, bright orange, taped to my mailbox. Non-standard grass blade length. 2 days later, improper porch lighting. Then, unauthorized security camera location. The message was clear: punishment. Not for a real violation. For disobedience. For cutting off the queen. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly understand, was that every attempt she made to control me only pulled her deeper into my domain. Every connection. Every login. Every email she sent from her HOA laptop, all of it had passed through my router. I hadn't just seen her devices. I'd traced her network habits, logged timestamps, and archived her digital footprints. She thought she was slapping me with fines. She didn't realize she was slathering her crimes in metadata. All because I changed a single password. And maybe you're wondering, where would you draw the line? When the HOA finds your grass, your mailbox, your porch light, or when the woman finding you screams outside your house because her Alexa won't listen without your bandwidth. Maybe the real question is, how do you fight someone who thinks you belong to them? She didn't knock this time. She just stood at the edge of my lawn like a malfunctioning Roomba, stuck between indignation and audacity, waving a violation notice like it was an eviction letter. "Your porch camera faces the sidewalk," she said, as if announcing a felony. "That's surveillance of public space. Against HOA code." I didn't even respond. Not because I didn't have a rebuttal, but because in that moment I realized something important. This wasn't about lights or cameras or mulch. This was about power. Karen's power. And mine. And how she'd just lost the only invisible thread that kept her world from collapsing. My bandwidth. Because while she stood there posturing like a poorly coded authority bot, inside her fortress across the street, her devices were dying slow, dramatic deaths. The Ring doorbell was no longer recording. Her sprinkler system had defaulted to a test cycle and was now watering the sidewalk on a perfect Tuesday afternoon. One of her upstairs smart bulbs had glitched into a strobe loop, and the flickering was visible through the blinds like a suburban rave held hostage. That day I didn't argue. I just smiled and took the notice, filed it into a new folder I had created. Karen's paper trail physical. It would complement the digital one quite nicely. But she didn't stop. The next violation claimed my mailbox was now for degrees off axis. The one after that accused me of hosting unregistered guest activity, based on DoorDash drivers coming and going. Then came the mulch incident. According to Karen, my cedar mulch clashed with the community aesthetic. She suggested pine straw or crushed granite. I suggested she crush something else. Of course, not to her face. Not yet. Instead, I got curious. How was she generating these violations? Did she just invent them from memory, or was she actually documenting her little crusade? That's when I realized she was still trying to connect. My firewall had been logging repeated failed access attempts, her devices scanning, reconnecting, retrying under slightly altered device IDs. It was like watching someone jiggle a locked door over and over, hoping it would open on the 100th try. And worse, she was using that limited local cache access to submit emails to the HOA board. I cross-referenced packet logs with timestamps from HOA server submissions. Sure enough, most of her correspondence, especially the violation reports, were transmitted during windows where her devices had partial ghost access to my router. It wasn't full access, but it was enough to send packets. Enough to leave fingerprints. So I leaned in. I started tagging each log event with aliases. Her camera, KarenCam_South. Her Peloton, Bike of Judgment. Her Alexa, SpySpeaker_01. I wasn't just archiving her attempts, I was mapping her desperation. And while she papered my house with passive-aggressive fines, I began collecting the very things that would undo her. But Karen wasn't satisfied with just documentation. She started a campaign. It began subtly. Neighbors who used to wave now gave curt nods. The woman who walked her poodle past my house every morning started crossing the street instead. Kids who used to skateboard on my driveway no longer came by. Then came the Facebook post. It didn't mention me by name, but it didn't have to. Certain residents, it read, have begun rejecting the shared values of our community. There have been reports of erratic behavior, shouting matches with board members, and an unwillingness to maintain cooperative digital infrastructure. Cooperative, digital, infrastructure. My jaw actually clenched when I read that. She was reframing her own theft as communal generosity, and my refusal to be exploited as antisocial rebellion. The comments poured in like a faucet of fools. That explains the tension lately. I heard someone's been recording kids on the sidewalk. Maybe we should review our HOA vetting process? I didn't reply. I just watched. Archived. Screen captured every comment. Ran a bot to scrape future posts. And then I did something that Karen didn't expect. I turned on the camera. Not just the old ones. I upgraded everything: garage cam, front door, back porch, driveway, high definition, night vision, motion activated with rolling cloud backups. I wasn't just documenting her retaliation now. I was waiting for her to slip. And she did. It was just after 5:30 a.m. on a Friday when my phone buzzed. Motion detected, mailbox. I tapped into the feed, and there she was, Karen Mitchell, draped in a hoodie, kneeling beside my mailbox with a tape measure and level. She snapped photos from deliberately skewed angles, tilting her phone like a low-rent paparazzi trying to catch a scandal. I watched her pace back and forth, checking her phone, then placing a small chalk mark near the base of the post, like she was framing a crime scene that hadn't happened yet. I saved the footage, dated it, synced it to 3 locations, including a cloud backup in a jurisdiction outside our state. Later that afternoon, I received a new violation: mailbox structural misalignment. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was sad. Karen had gone from nuisance to full-on fraud, and she didn't even realize I was watching her commit it. She thought she was winning. That same weekend, glossy flyers appeared in every mailbox in the neighborhood. Is Cedar Pines becoming an Airbnb slum? The flyer featured a zoomed-in photo of my house taken from across the street. A caption underneath read, "Strangers coming and going. Unfamiliar vehicles at all hours." A concerned neighbor asks, "What are we becoming?" No attribution. No source. Just fear and implication. I didn't even need to check the metadata. I could feel her smugness from across the street. But what Karen didn't understand was that each act of escalation only made her more traceable. I began overlaying her activity timelines with my router logs. Her submissions. Her camera alerts. Her Alexa requests. I mapped them like a constellation of incompetence. Every packet routed through my network was a breadcrumb. Every forged fine a flag. I started building something, a digital war room. Timestamps. MAC addresses. PDF metadata. Email headers. Network logs. A timeline that stretched like a novel, annotated with color-coded receipts of her entire campaign. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because Karen was operating like no one was watching. She believed she could manipulate perception, erase footprints, and dominate a community into silence. What she didn't know, what she would never expect, was that her crimes weren't buried. They were broadcast. Whisper campaigns. Forged screenshots. Fabricated violations. All done under the assumption that she controlled the narrative. But I was the one holding the server. And slowly, quietly, I was preparing to upload everything. You might ask, why not stop it now? Why wait? Why let her keep walking deeper into her own mess? Because when someone's digging their own hole, you don't stop them. You just make sure the ground is soft enough for the fall to leave a mark. And Karen wasn't done falling. Not yet. It was exactly 2:37 a.m. when my phone buzzed again. Another failed access attempt, this time from a new device ID I hadn't seen before. Mitchell Guest Kitchen. I stared at it, blinked twice, and let out a dry laugh. She wasn't just desperate, she was evolving. This wasn't Karen fumbling with forgotten passwords. This was Karen systematically trying to reclaim her tether. She was brute forcing her way into my network with the same clumsy determination she used to measure mailboxes. But the thing about brute force is, it leaves bruises. And hers were starting to show. Over the next 2 days, my system caught 17 new access attempts. Each one cloaked in the digital equivalent of a Halloween mask, slightly altered names, spoofed MAC addresses, randomized pings. She even tried masking her signal as a neighbor's Roku. But the pattern was unmistakable. It was Karen. And she was escalating. That week, I received 4 more violation notices. One accused me of audio pollution, because my wind chimes supposedly exceeded decibel limits. Another cited unsanctioned lawn patterning, because I had mowed in concentric circles instead of the traditional grid. I started pinning them to my fridge like a twisted badge of honor. They weren't notices, they were timestamps. Every single one matched a failed login attempt within the previous 24 hours. She was retaliating digitally and bureaucratically. And the tighter I locked the gates, the more erratic she became. But it wasn't just retaliation anymore. It was deflection. Because something was unraveling on her side of the street, and she needed a villain to keep eyes off the cracks forming beneath her throne. Then came the real twist. It arrived not as a letter or a knock, but as a screenshot. Sent from an anonymous email to the HOA board, and then forwarded to the group chat Karen thought I wasn't part of. It was a fabricated conversation. 2 fake accounts, both untraceable, talking about me. Claiming I'd threatened a neighbor. That I had cameras facing their kids. That I was recording audio from public sidewalks. It was textbook character assassination, with just enough digital seasoning to sound real to the digitally illiterate. The timestamps had been doctored. The headers scrubbed. But the linguistic fingerprint? That was all Karen. Her writing style was distinct. The way she used respectfully before every veiled insult. The double space after every period. The capitalized subject lines. I knew it before I ran the stylometry. But I did it anyway. Because truth doesn't matter unless it's provable. And that's when I realized the depth of her delusion. Karen wasn't just spinning a story. She was building a firewall of fiction around her reputation, layering lies like encryption. She thought if she built the narrative fast enough, no one would question the foundation. She thought if she shouted loudly enough, no one would notice the static behind her voice. But static is what I listened to, because inside the noise is the signal. And Karen had given me all the signal I needed. I revisited every HOA violation she had filed in the past 6 months. Not just against me, but against anyone. I dug into the server logs, metadata, modification dates. And what I found was astonishing. Entire violation notices had been backdated. Files created weeks after they were supposedly delivered. Photographic evidence with EXIF data showing they were taken on different days than claimed. One document had a timestamp that matched the exact moment Karen's laptop connected to my network during one of her stealthy 6 a.m. walks. Another was a PDF created, while her email claimed she was out of town on vacation in Michigan. But the IP address? Right here in Cedar Pines. My network. My log. Her lie. I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was reconstructing a crime scene, packet by packet, file by file. And as I traced each breadcrumb, I started to see the outline of something bigger. This wasn't just about my Wi-Fi. Karen had been using the HOA infrastructure as her personal enforcement arm. Weaponizing it. She'd submitted fake complaints under anonymous aliases that, when traced, shared the same writing quirks, the same phrasing, the same device metadata. She had created a shadow system of control, wrapped in HOA letterhead, printed on recycled paper. But the data didn't lie. She did. And I was done watching. It was time to take a step forward. I started by drafting a report. Not a complaint. Not a rant. A forensic breakdown. Timestamps. IP traces. File creation logs. Screen captures. Cross-reference server submissions. I logged every violation she submitted while connected to my network. I compared creation dates to my DNS records. I showed where files were altered, where metadata was stripped, where edits were made post-submission. And I attached everything. Sealed. Chronological. Signed with my own digital signature and a hash string embedded in a blockchain verification tool. Not because I thought someone would tamper with it, but because I knew Karen would try. The report went to 3 places. First, the HOA board secretary, Thomas, one of the only members who still made eye contact with me in public. Second, a friend who worked as a legal assistant for the state consumer fraud division. Third, and most importantly to myself. Encrypted. Air-gapped. Redundant. Because Karen wasn't predictable. She was desperate. And desperation makes people sloppy. That very night, I received another anonymous message. This one wasn't a fake conversation. It was a threat, veiled but clear. Some residents are pushing too hard. Some residents might not like what happens next. HOA unity is fragile. Don't be the one to break it. No signature. No name. But the sender used the same temporary email server I'd traced to a previous alias she created. Same IP block range. Same linguistic tics. I filed it, logged it, added it to the report, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I installed a small object in my front window, a signal jammer. Legal? Technically no. Functional? Absolutely. I never turned it on. Didn't need to. I just made sure it was visible through the blinds, a silent declaration. Karen saw it within hours. That evening, her husband Bob came by, awkwardly holding a Tupperware container of lasagna. "Hey neighbor," he said, not making eye contact. Just checking in. You haven't noticed any weird signal interference lately, have you? I took the lasagna. Just interference from flaming bags of bandwidth theft, I said. He didn't laugh. Just nodded, turned, and walked home. The next morning, Karen's yard underwent a miraculous transformation. Every solar light replaced. Lawn edges trimmed with surgical precision. A new bird bath installed, ironically violating the same ordinance she once cited against another neighbor. It was panic disguised as perfection. But perfection cracks under scrutiny. And scrutiny was all I had left. I was documenting her collapse in real time. Not just for me. Not for revenge. For truth. Because truth, unlike lies, doesn't require reinforcement. It simply waits to be revealed. And Karen, self-proclaimed guardian of cedar pines, was building her entire regime atop a stolen signal, a fraudulent trail, and a growing list of digital fingerprints she couldn't scrub clean. I wasn't the villain in her story. I was the forensic footnote. The packet she forgot to encrypt. The silent observer who knew that control doesn't come from fear, it comes from information. And I had all of it. The only question left was when to strike. And what kind of crater I wanted to leave behind. She must have sensed something. Maybe it was the silence on the Facebook group, or the sudden pause in her loyalists' reposting of her HOA wisdom memes. Maybe it was Bob's awkward shuffle when he handed me the Tupperware, or the way Thomas started arriving late and leaving early from meetings without his usual notebook. Maybe it was nothing and everything all at once. But Karen knew something had shifted, and in response, she doubled down. 3 more violation notices arrived that week, each more absurd than the last. One cited emotionally disruptive lighting schemes, because my porch bulb changed from warm white to soft blue on Tuesdays. Another labeled my front-facing Ring camera as passive-aggressive surveillance. The third accused my driveway of being visually jarring, due to the apparent nonconformity of concrete texture. I laughed the kind of laugh that lives just on the edge of anger, then documented each one, scanned the barcodes, photographed their placement on my property, and added them to the archive. I had dozens now, carefully filed in digital and physical formats, a dossier of suburban tyranny so thick it needed a table of contents. But the notices weren't the interesting part. It was what they didn't include anymore. No timestamps, no delivery signatures, no board approvals. They were ghosts, fabrications hastily printed and slipped into mailboxes under cover of dusk. She was abandoning procedure because procedure was traceable. She knew I was watching now, and that made her dangerous. Which is why I stayed quiet. I waited. I listened. I let her run. Because the longer she sprinted, the more she stumbled. One morning, I checked the HOA email server access logs. Yes, I still had observer visibility thanks to a cached session cookie from the last time Karen's laptop unknowingly used my Wi-Fi. The admin panel was a digital crime scene. Files had been uploaded with overlapping timestamps, some allegedly submitted from an IP in Florida, while the same device was logged in locally in Cedar Pines. One document had its file name altered 3 times in a single minute. I tracked the versions, each one slightly tweaked. The violation reason. The evidence photo. The signature line. It was as if she was trying to backfill history in real time, editing her own past like a novelist afraid of plot holes. And the emails, God, the emails. Hundreds of them. Some from fake residents, some from burner Gmail accounts that matched the same 3 IP addresses she'd used before. They all fed into the same narrative, that I was unstable, a threat to the community, a potential legal risk. That I'd harassed board members, filmed minors, interfered with HOA operations. They were planting seeds for a board decision. She was manufacturing justification for removal. Expulsion. Blacklisting. But I already had my roots in the system. The board's internal document repository, though guarded by logins, had backups, and Karen didn't know that versioning was enabled by default. I downloaded previous iterations of board meeting minutes, then compared them with the public versions she posted to the HOA site. The differences were subtle at first. Missing lines. Quiet redactions. But over time, the gaps widened. Entire discussions omitted. Objections from Thomas scrubbed. Questions about spending quietly vanished. In one case, a line stating Member Carter raised concerns about digital protocol misuse was completely replaced with no objections noted. I screenshotted both versions. Timestamped the deletion. Traced it back to her laptop's IP. The paper trail was gone. But the data trail was eternal. It was no longer about her using my Wi-Fi. It was about how she had used it to commit digital forgery, obstruction of HOA processes, and misappropriation of authority. So I did what any reasonable person with 15 years of cyber forensics experience would do. I built a case. A complete one. I started with a timeline, day by day, infraction by infraction, showing her escalation, her access, her falsifications. Then I layered in the technical logs, MAC addresses, router access attempts, session cookies, DNS queries. Every packet, every trace. Every connection attempt she made during those stolen minutes of connectivity, recorded and indexed. Then came the screenshots, the altered files, the photoshopped violation notices, the flyers, the manipulated images with forged timestamps. I reverse engineered her entire campaign. But I didn't stop there. I reached out, quietly, to a contact at the state's cybercrime unit. I didn't present it as revenge. I presented it as what it was: systemic fraud committed under the guise of local governance, executed through unauthorized digital access, and layered with document tampering. I submitted everything through an encrypted channel. No drama, no noise, just facts. The truth with footnotes. Then I waited. And while I waited, Karen began to rot. Not visibly, not publicly, but in the quiet spaces where people notice absence. She skipped a board meeting, then another. Her front garden, once a manicured monument to suburban discipline, started to slip. A few weeds, a crooked gnome. Her porch light blinked erratically at dusk. Her Ring camera disconnected, then came back online, then vanished again. Her house, once the symbol of HOA perfection, had become a haunted shell of blinking errors and system resets. Still, I didn't engage. I wanted her to stew in her own silence. I let the community draw their own conclusions. Then, 3 weeks after submitting the report, something happened. Subtle at first. A reply from my contact, under review, confirming IP logs and document trail. Will advise. The same day, the Facebook group, Cedar Pines Strong, went eerily quiet. No motivational posts. No passive-aggressive reminders about lawn edging. Just stillness. 2 days later, an emergency board meeting was scheduled. Private session. Members only. No explanation. But I knew. I monitored the HOA email tracker I'd embedded. Every board member opened my report within 24 hours. One forwarded it to a private attorney. Another accessed it 3 times in a row from different devices. Panic leaves patterns. And patterns are my language. That weekend, neighbors started to whisper. Small things. Hey, did you hear Karen's not coming to the fall market? Someone said there's an audit happening? I think something's going on with the board. I didn't confirm. I didn't deny. I just let the current flow. Let the truth move like groundwater, slow, inevitable, eroding her foundation from beneath. That Monday, I received my final violation notice. Hostile signage. It cited a sticker I'd placed inside my own window, one that read, "Smile. You're on camera." I framed it, not because it was funny, but because it was proof of her unraveling. 2 hours after I got it, she was on my lawn. Again. This time with 2 other board members trailing behind like reluctant interns. She waved a packet of printed bylaws in my face, her voice tight and cracking. You think this is a game? We know what you're doing. I didn't reply. I just raised my phone and began recording. She froze. The others looked away. One cleared his throat and muttered something about needing to review protocol. Karen stood there, seething, papers fluttering like broken wings. Then she left. No words. Just retreat. And in that moment, I knew the game wasn't mine. It never had been. It was hers. And she'd just lost. The final HOA meeting of the year began like all the others, with the illusion of order and the quiet hum of folding chairs scraping linoleum. 6 p.m. sharp. Cedar Pines Community Center. Fluorescent lighting humming overhead like an anxious insect. The air buzzed not with anticipation, but with static. You could feel it in the posture of the attendees. Slightly too rigid, backs too straight, as if they were bracing for impact but didn't know from which direction it would come. I arrived early. Not for theatrics. For positioning. Front row center. No binder. No backpack. No USB drives. Everything I needed had already been submitted, backed up, validated, mirrored in 3 separate encrypted clouds and timestamped across international data centers. I came with nothing but presence. The room filled faster than usual. Faces I hadn't seen in months appeared in the periphery, neighbors who'd gone silent during the worst of Karen's reign. Even Nancy, the retired librarian Karen once fined for an excessive garden gnome cluster, took her place in the back corner. There was a murmur among the crowd, the kind that preceded storms or verdicts. Karen entered 2 minutes late, clipboard in hand, lips drawn into a smile so tight it could snap glass. She wore her HOA uniform, pressed beige slacks, navy cardigan, practical flats, but her eyes darted faster than usual, scanning the room not like a leader but like a fugitive in disguise. She took her place at the front, cleared her throat with theatrical precision, and began with the usual opening statement about community values and shared standards. No mention of the investigation. No reference to the audit that had quietly begun 2 weeks earlier. She smiled through the anxiety, controlled her breathing. She thought the show would go on. It didn't. Midway through her monotone update on mulch compliance and budget adjustments, the rear doors opened. 2 plainclothes officials stepped inside. Not dramatic. No sunglasses indoors. Just calm professionalism. One held a leather folder. The other scanned the crowd, eyes landing on Karen before anyone else. Karen Mitchell? The first asked, raising a badge for a half second. Karen blinked. Once. Twice. Then slowly nodded. We're here with a warrant to seize all HOA-managed digital devices under your direct control, he said evenly. This includes laptops, tablets, hard drives, USB devices, and network storage. Karen's face shifted in real time. Surprise collapsed into disbelief. Disbelief melted into outrage. This is absurd, she said, laughing without humor. I'm in the middle of a scheduled. You'll be given a receipt for all items, the officer interrupted gently. Compliance is strongly recommended. You could hear the collective inhale of the room, sharp and fragile. One board member, someone I'd never seen speak, stood up and moved a step away from the table. Another stared at his folded hands like they might contain an escape plan. Karen didn't move. For a second, I thought she might refuse, might escalate. But then her grip on the clipboard slackened. She placed it gently on the table, like a broken sword. The officers moved forward, quietly collecting her devices. Her laptop. Her tablet. A thumb drive disguised as a pen. Everything handed over without a scene. But it wasn't over. I stood. Calmly. Measured. No dramatic reveal. I held up a single printed page. I'd like to enter something into the public record, I said. The room turned. Karen didn't. She stared forward, frozen, as if pretending not to see me might undo the past 6 months. This document, I continued, was created on Karen Mitchell's personal laptop, at a time she claimed to be out of state. It was routed through a network she was not authorized to access. It includes a fabricated violation issued against my property, one of 16 identified through forensic analysis. I handed the page to the secretary. Another board member leaned over to see. The room was dead silent. Additionally, I said, these same devices, under her administrative login, submitted altered HOA meeting minutes, deleted resident feedback, and approved fines retroactively through unauthorized channels. All of it is traceable. All of it is verifiable. Karen finally turned. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something raw behind them, not rage, not control, but fear. Real fear. This is a smear campaign, she hissed. None of this is, he's lying. He's manipulating. No one's manipulating anything, I replied. The packet data speaks for itself. You connected to my guest network. You left footprints. Every click, every upload, every fake complaint, it all came through my server. One of the officers looked at Karen. Ma'am, we recommend you refrain from further commentary at this time. She sat, slowly, her hands trembling just enough for the pen to rattle against the table. The meeting did not resume. It couldn't. The board called an emergency recess. Members filed out, dazed. The audience lingered, unsure if what they had witnessed was justice or a breakdown or both. Karen was escorted out 15 minutes later. No cuffs. Not yet. But the walk was unmistakably a walk of shame. Past neighbors she'd once intimidated. Past homes she'd fined. Past me. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. By the end of the week, 3 board members had resigned. Karen's HOA access was revoked. Her home internet was suspended by court order pending a forensic audit. The charges came slowly, one after another like dominoes. Unauthorized access to a protected network, document tampering, cyber harassment, forgery, data fraud. Over a dozen counts. The local news ran the story under a painfully on-the-nose headline. HOA Queenpin indicted in digital fraud scandal. I printed the article. Framed it. Hung it in my garage. Cedar Pines changed after that. Not overnight. But gradually. Rules were reviewed by actual legal professionals. The HOA portal was rebuilt from scratch with proper credentials, encryption, and audit logs. Anonymous violations were suspended. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in months re-emerged. A few even brought back lawn chairs. Someone restarted the spring picnic. I didn't run for the board. That was never the goal. But I did help draft the new digital use policy. I taught a workshop on data privacy and ethical infrastructure. I made sure every board member knew how to spot a falsified PDF and why metadata mattered. Karen never came back. Her house stayed dark. For sale signs went up. Then came down. No buyers. Too much digital baggage. Too much bad blood. Her Peloton stopped working. Her sprinkler system got stuck again, this time running for 4 hours straight during a drought notice. The HOA didn't fine her. No one did. The silence was enough. As for me, I quietly renamed my guest network. FBI Surveillance Van 3. No password. No devices connected. Just the name. A reminder that sometimes justice doesn't come with handcuffs or headlines. Sometimes it arrives as a log file. A packet trace. A silent witness watching from the other side of the signal.